Hi everyone, welcome to English 484W, Me Too Era Fiction and Poetry. So in this video, the first YouTube video lecture that I've ever recorded, I'm just going to be giving a brief introduction to the course. So I'm going to be doing just kind of a little bit of talking to start, and then I'll get into kind of a more in-depth presentation after a little bit. So I just wanted to give some of the reasoning for why we're doing this course. What kind of thinking went into the design of it. So it actually goes back to the first text that we're covering on the reading list, Cat Person. So Cat Person came out in late 2017, and I liked the story, but the thing that struck me more was the reaction to it. So it was a very kind of popular short story. It went viral. It was supposed to be the first short story to have ever gone viral. So it was read by a lot of people, and there was a kind of a lot of hot takes on it. A lot of people that were interpreting fiction or reading fiction for the first time maybe since high school. So they didn't really know, not like us English students, so they didn't really know how to properly read this kind of complex object. So it produced a lot of really kind of bad takes, and I thought the text wasn't really being read properly. And I don't mean that in a kind of an elitist fashion, that they weren't finding like the deep meaning to the text that was obviously clearly there for a sophisticated reader like myself. But the main failure of reading was that they weren't even treating it, or a lot of people weren't even treating it like a work of fiction. So when Cat Person came out, there was a lot of people confusing it with being kind of just like this sad blog entry on this girl's blog or something about a bad date, her kind of whining to the internet, or as a kind of a think piece or a piece of cultural criticism that a lot of readers, particularly male readers, thought was basically just too mean to men and not very realistic. So a lot of the kind of the misreading came down to people not even treating a short story like a work of fiction, but treating it like something else, like a lot of the other kind of materials that we read on the internet. So like the kind of the hot take genre, or that you kind of find on like websites like Jezebel, or that kind of thing. So that was one of the kind of the ways that I thought that Cat Person was kind of just being misread on a kind of a mass scale, and particularly by, as I said, by male readers who there was also a Twitter account created actually to kind of capture in real time male readers responding to this text in kind of just ways that were just problematic, or were reacting to it way too personally, thinking the text was like an attack on men as a whole. There was also a BBC short story that was published that I read it, and I still can't really figure out what it was trying to do. It was Cat Person, but written from Robert's perspective. So because Robert's perspective is absent from Rupenian's Cat Person, this BBC anonymous writer thought it'd be a good idea to kind of fill in, give the complete story by offering Robert's perspective on the events. And this was kind of humorously mocked by this another website telling the story Cat Person from the cat's perspective. So Moo and Yon, the two cats, two suspected cats of Robert, telling the story, and it's just basically going meow 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 endlessly. So just that idea that the story had to be kind of filled in, there had to be a complete story given right away, was kind of interesting. That I mean, because Rupenian told the story in the way that she did, like taking out Robert's perspective for a reason. She's an intelligent writer. She structured the story for a specific reason. And to kind of take away that structure from the story and give the complete story completely ruins the story, basically. The form of the story is almost more important than the content of the story. But there is also other kind of misreadings that were going on, and that weren't so much just like the male readers responding to Cat Person. There was also just kind of this was more collective, but thinking that the story should have some moral message to it. So have some kind of lesson for the time period that it kind of just happened into, which was around the time when Me Too was just starting in the fall of 2017. So a lot of readers read it expecting this kind of clear moral message about gender relations, expecting that there was a bad character, an evil character, and then a good character, and the story kind of just being a moral tale. But the complications to that, which Rupenian kind of programs into the story, are that Margo is also a flawed character. Robert's clearly a flawed character, but Margo also, there's some things that she does, some things that she thinks. Particularly, there was a lot of comments on her, perhaps her fat phobia or her body shaming of Robert. So there was also a bit of a tension in terms of these two characters both being flawed. Of course, these flaws are different, and there's different levels of danger for both characters involving their flaws, but the story kind of muddies the waters in terms of there being a clear kind of perpetrator and victim narrative, which was kind of the structure of a lot of Me Too narratives that were coming out at that time, where it was kind of clear who was the good guy and who was the bad guy. So Cat Person kind of emerged into that I don't know, kind of textual ecosphere, and it made waves, to continue the metaphor. So that kind of it's kind of closeness in structure to a lot of the Me Too narratives that were coming out at that point, kind of telling similar bad date stories where there was kind of something that was happening that was created by kind of unfair gender relations or power dynamics that were going on, that wasn't perhaps just as simple as rape or sexual violence, but there was something problematic going on that also the other story that we're reading this week, so the Aziz Ansari story, also kind of captured. So this kind of gender problems that didn't rise to the kind of to the extreme of rape or sexual violence, but still presented a situation that was very uncomfortable and distressing and a little bit scary. So that was the way that kind of Cat Person interacted with Me Too, and was one of the factors in why it was kind of misread on a mass or collective scale. So the question that this course that's on the syllabus, and that I kind of designed the course a little bit around, was the question that was this kind of failure that I'm pushing forward here to read Cat Person in the proper way, meaning treating it like a complex object and not just kind of a simple story, but something with layers of meaning to it. Is that failure to read this complicated fictional object, is that connected to our failure, particularly in the digital or the internet age, to read other people, to have encounters with other people in which perhaps verbal cues aren't given, perhaps there's a little bit of ambiguity in our interactions with other people that isn't simple. So basically, is our failure to read Cat Person as a complex object, is that related to our failure to read people as complex objects in the internet age? So I'm just going to read a quick quote here from a writer for The Atlantic, Olga Kazan. And she wrote this article right when Cat Person came out, and again, this was kind of during the height of the Me Too era, I guess. So she wrote, "Recent months make it seem like humanity has lost the instruction manual for its procreate function and has had to relearn it all from scratch. After scores of prominent men have been fired on sexual assault allegations, confusion reigns about signals, how to read them, and how not to read into them. Some men are wondering if hugging women is still okay. Some male managers are inviting third parties into performance reviews in order to avoid being alone with women. One San Francisco design firm director recently said holiday parties should be canceled, as the New York Times reported, until it has been figured out how men and women should interact." So our failure to be able to read other people, particularly across the gender gap, reached such a fever pitch or intensity during this time that there was this kind of very extreme reactions going on that maybe men and women as the two social classes should spend some time apart, relearning how to interact with each other or how to read each other. So these two failures of reading are definitely kind of, I think, interconnected. So like the easy answer to the question I kind of lay out on the syllabus and that I just asked is that yes, our failure to be able to read complicated or complex fictional texts is also related to our failure to read people as complicated objects as well. So there's ways in which that is kind of just programmed into us. So the basic example being, today, if we have an encounter with someone on the street, well, not today because we're not really going out in public and meeting people, hopefully, but in the before times, before the COVID-19 crisis began, when we went out in public or we met a stranger somewhere, I don't know, at a poetry reading or just at a cafe, and perhaps we had a good interaction with this person, or perhaps we had a bad interaction with this person, and then we came home. There's something about that person maybe that intrigued us a little bit, and I don't want to out myself, but a kind of a common behavior is to Google people, to type their names if you got it somehow into Google, or whatever information you have into Google, and try to find the digital footprint of this person, so their social media profiles. And then you could spend a lot of time kind of reading all the information that there is about a person online. It's a bit of a rabbit hole for a lot of people, especially if their profiles are set to public, although that isn't as common these days. And this kind of reading of people by their digital footprint, we'll explore it more in the Caroline Kepnes novel, You, where it is a kind of a main behavior that's under examination. So the main character in that novel, Joe, he has an encounter with Beck at his bookstore, and after this encounter that intrigued him, he does some kind of digital stalking and IRL, in real life stalking of Beck as well. So the way that we read people today has a lot to do with the internet. The internet is a kind of a primary lens for us to read people, to understand them, and there's potentially a lot of problems with that. And perhaps those problems are also connected to our failure to read complicated literary texts as well. So perhaps in this course, by better, hopefully better learning how to read kind of complicated literary texts, we can also, as kind of a more social goal, also improve our reading of people IRL, hopefully, if we can get back to that. So I'm just going to move into a presentation just to get into more depth in terms of the background to the course. So I'll just get into that.